Hey everyone, welcome back to Amberg Acres. I hope you enjoyed your holidays. We're in a new year, 2020, and I'm told it's the year of vision. So I don't know where these people get this stuff from, but that's what I'm told. So the reason we're here today is last year when I made my wine rack video, I had mentioned that would be a good job for a TIG welder. So guess what? Santa Claus was nice to me this year. He brought me a TIG welder. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a little review of this TIG welder. There's a bunch of videos out there on this particular welder, but I'm going to do my own little review on it, and I'm going to explain to you why I think it's a good buy for the beginner welder or the hobbyist, because that's what that welder is for. It's not an industrial welder. If you have a business or you want to be in a welding business or in a factory, you're not going to buy this welder. But this is for a hobbyist or a do-it-yourselfer at home, working in your garage, working on your cars. This is a pretty good welder for doing that. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to go over what comes with this welder. So I purchased this welder right from the company AHP, and here's what I paid for it. So they must have a little bit of an issue getting these out the door because they're all delayed a little bit. So it took a while to get here, but I thought it was a pretty good price, and I think for the money, it's a pretty good welder. Now I was also looking at the one from Harbor Freight, the Vulcan welders, and for some reason when I went back on there this year, all of a sudden they didn't have the Vulcan welder anymore. The 200 TIG or whatever it was called. And I'm not really sure what's going on there, but I did some more research and I watched a few more videos, and this is the one I came up with, the Alpha TIG 201 XD. So as far as I know from watching the other videos, there's been some upgrades here in this 201 XD compared to the 200, which is the older version. And one of the upgrades was the TIG torch, and the other upgrade was the foot pedal. There were a lot of complaints about what came with the other model, so they obviously listened to their customers and upgraded. So first off, in this kit, you're going to get the welder, of course. Then you're going to get the TIG torch. Okay. Now, I've seen a couple different versions of this TIG torch. This one actually has a swivel on it, which is kind of neat. It helps you get in different positions. Okay, you're going to get a ground clamp. Got to have that. You're going to get the foot pedal, and this is the new version. It's a Nova. I'm not sure what the model number is, but it's a Nova foot pedal. You're going to get a little pigtail here, which is used to convert from 220 volt down to 110 volt. This unit is a dual voltage. Primarily you use the 220 volt, which is what you would use on a dryer or something else in your house, and then you can convert down to a 110 volt. Now once you go down to the 110 volt, you're not going to be able to go to higher amperages. You're only going to be able to weld light metal with it. It's not going to go up very high. And then they also give you the stick welder portion of it, the little stinger here to hold your stick rods. Now I am not an expert at welding. I've been welding for 40 years, but I am by no means an expert. When you see these videos or you see these pictures of these perfect welds on stuff, that's done by a guy that welds every day. He knows what he's doing. That's not me. I'm just the average guy that welds in his basement, and I weld at work once in a while and here and there, and that's what I am. Okay, so I am by no means an expert at any of this stuff. So then the last thing that came in the kit was a little hand switch that goes on your torch, and then you can use your finger instead of the foot pedal to control your weld, and we'll go over that in a minute here and how that actually works. And then the last thing they give you is, they don't give you this container obviously, but they give you some what they call combustibles, some extra nozzles to give you another smaller version of the torch. It's a little bit smaller than the one I have on there right now, and you know, the little pieces that go inside the torches. So what doesn't come with the welder? So what doesn't come with the welder is the tungsten. Okay, I have 3 different sizes here. I have an 1/8 inch diameter, a 3/36 diameter, and a 1/16 diameter. Now, you don't have to go out and get, if you're just starting out, you don't have to go out and get all these different sizes of tungsten. I just have the red one, which is considered a 2% thoriated, whatever that is. It's something they put into tungsten. There's all different colors out there. There's purples, there's greens, there's from what I understand with the new welders, it doesn't matter what you use really. So I'm going with the economical choice, which was the red. And as far as the size goes, you can take a big tungsten, a bigger diameter tungsten, and you can grind a fine tip on it and weld a small weld. But you cannot take the smaller tungsten, a little 16th tungsten, and go up and weld a heavy piece of, 1/4 inch or 3/8 inch material. You're just gonna blow it away. So, you can pick one in the middle at 3/32, it'll probably work for most of the stuff you're gonna weld with. So the next thing that you're gonna have to go out and purchase is you're gonna have to purchase the actual dipping rods, okay? Now I primarily weld steel, a little bit of stainless here and there. So I just went out and got the ER70. I have 3 different sizes to kind of correlate with the tungsten. I got the 16th, I got the 3/32, and I got the 1/8 inch rods, okay? So you could probably get away, if all you're doing is hobby type welding, you could probably get away with 3/32 tungsten, 3/32 rod, and you wouldn't have to buy anything else. But, I just went and got a couple of pieces of each, okay? The last thing that you're not gonna get is you're not gonna get a gas bottle, okay? So you have to go out and purchase this gas bottle, and then once you purchase the gas bottle, you can take it back and get it refilled. And they're kind of pricey. I bought the 80. It was up there to buy it. So that's something you're going to need to take into consideration, because you're going to go out and buy this welder and you're not going to be able to weld with it until you get that gas bottle and the tungsten and the rods. So you need to have that stuff too. The kit also comes with the regulator that's on the gas bottle. That was another one that was a kind of a complaint with one of the older models. They didn't like the regulator, and now it looks like it's a pretty good regulator to have on there. So that tells me that at least AHP was listening to the customers, and they made some upgrades here. So why don't we go to the front of this welder here, and we're going to hook this all up, and then I'm going to do a few welds for you, and we're going to see how this thing works. So here we are at the front of the welder. It's kind of color coded. It's not real hard to put together here. They have a red for your positive, they have a black for your negative, they have a port for the foot pedal, and they have a port for the gas tube. So these are real simple to put together. So your ground clamp is red, so obviously it's going into red. So there's really, that I know of, there ain't a whole lot of times that you would ever switch this. But for stick welding, you can switch it. You can switch the things back and forth, and it changes your welding a little bit. I've never done that. Like I say, I'm not an expert, so There's probably videos out there on why you would switch to polarity. But for the way we're going to do it, we're going to just hook it up the way they tell you to do it. So basically red to red. You put it in there and it's like a quarter to a half a turn, and it snugs it up. So then the black, obviously, is the torch is going to go into the black one. And again, it's about almost a half a turn, and it locks itself in. And then the little tube here that's on the torch is going to go into this little fitting right here. That's for your gas. So you got the torch hooked up, you got the clamp hooked up. The last thing is the foot pedal. Now this has a little notch in the top. Okay, so you're going to put that, match up the notch, make sure it's pushed in all the way, and then tighten the little nut. And that's all there is to it. Now, if you're going to switch from TIG welding to stick welding, again, black to black, you're just going to take that out of there and you're going to plug this in, and then you're on a stick welder. It's a pretty simple changeover. So this gas actually goes through the machine and it comes out on the back side over here. There's a little hose that goes to your gas bottle and your regulator. So that's about it. It's all hooked up. Turn your power switch on and you're good to go. Set your flow over there on the bottle. Now I went and looked up a few things here to get the settings right and whatever, and I found a couple of websites where they have calculators. A TIG welding calculator is basically what it's called. One with Miller welds, and I'll put the link for that below here. But here's what that looks like. So on this sheet, you just or on this calculator on the computer, you just you put in there what you're going to weld: steel, stainless steel, a 3/16 butt weld, and then it automatically spits out what it thinks you should be using. So here you go. You got a 3/32 tungsten. It says historically 2% thoriated tungsten, red band, prepared with a pointed end has been used. So it's telling you what you really need to have to weld. It's telling you your torch cup should be a 1/4 to 3/8. Your filler metal should be an 1/8 inch. You're on DC, straight polarity, amperage range 125 to 200. Your gas is argon. It's always going to be argon for TIG welding. And then your gas flow rate is telling you 13 CFH or 20 PSI, and a welding speed, which doesn't matter to me. I could care less about the welding speed. So, I mean, it's all there. It's all on the internet for you. You just got to go look it up. So that's millerwelds.com. The link will be on the description. So let's go on and let's cover this front panel. Okay. So on this front panel, you got basically a set of toggle switches, and you got a bunch of dial knobs. Okay. So let's cover the toggle switches first. So the first switch is showing you a little stick welder and a TIG welder. So we want to have it on the bottom one, the TIG welder. The second switch is going to be AC or DC. You obviously want to have it on DC. Okay. The third switch down in the left corner is a 2T, 4T switch. Now I had to look this up because I didn't know what the 2T, 4T was. So the 2T is basically what you're going to be using with the foot pedal. When you use the foot pedal, you push on the pedal, the gas comes on, you control the amperage by moving the pedal, and when you let off, it shuts off the arc. Okay? So the 4T is used when you're using this hand switch that came in your kit, and you have this attached to your handle here, and the way it's describing it is you push it down and hold it, it turns on the arc with the start amps, what you have your start amps set to. So it'll stay at the start amps until you release the switch. Once you release the switch, it will go to your main amps, which you have set as your main amps. Now I have this one set at 150 right now. So it would go to 150. It would stay at the 150 amps. You make your bead, and then when you're ready to stop, you depress that switch again, and then it goes to your end amps, what you have set on here as your end amps, and it will weld until you, on the end amps, until you release that switch, and then it'll shut off. It'll do your last post flow, you know, whatever you have your post flow set at, and then it'll shut the arc off. Okay, so I had to look that up because I didn't know what the 2T 4T switch was either. So basically, one is for the foot pedal, one is for the switch. I never used one of these switches, and I'm not even going to attempt to use it. I've always used the foot pedal. So I mean, go ahead and try it if you want to try it. I can see it, you know, if you're, you know, maybe working under a car or something somewhere and you can't work the foot pedal. I can see this probably working, but once you release that switch, you don't have any control over your temperature except for what you have your dial set at. Where with the foot pedal, I can, you know, I can back off. If I'm too hot, I can back off a little bit and continue welding. With this, you're set at what you're set at. So you gotta pretty much get your settings right first, and then go do your welding. So that's what the 2T 4T switch is. The last switch is the pulse switch. Now I have it in the off position. The other two positions, I am not finding it in the book anywhere what they actually mean. But what do you use the pulse for? Well, the pulse is used for different types of welding. Okay, so I printed off a little sheet here that tells me that you know, out of position welding, thin metals, cosmetic work, metals with high thermal conductivity, such as aluminum, deeper penetration, and welds with less heat. So there's all kinds of things you can use the pulse for. You can weld all the time with the pulse on if you want. I don't really use it because the stuff I'm doing doesn't require me to use it. But the best way I can describe it is if you watched my trailer weld video from a year or two ago, I did a vertical up with the stick. So on the vertical up, I did like a J pattern. I welded, got out of the weld, came back into the weld, and the whole time I kept my arc going. So what that does is that gives that weld puddle a little time to cool, and then you get out of it and you come back into it, and it gives it a little time to cool so it just doesn't run out the bottom. And that's essentially what the pulsing will do for you on a vertical weld. It'll pulse, and it's a percentage. You have a couple dials here. It's a percentage of the main. So you're gonna have the main, it's gonna be burning deep, then it's gonna pulse, and it's gonna go to 50% of the main if that's what you have it set at. And then it'll go back to the main, and then there's also I believe it's a certain amount of seconds, what this on and off time is. And I've never really welded with the pulse, so you're gonna have to play with that if you wanna do the pulse welding. But that's the easiest way I can describe it. It's like doing a vertical up with a stick. Instead of doing the motion, this is doing it for you by going on and off, on and off, on and off. It doesn't really go off, but it goes to a percentage. So it'll be, you know, you might be going from 150 amps to 50 amps, and then back up to 150 amps, and that's how the pulsing works. That's the easiest way I can describe it. So that's it for the toggle switches. It's pretty simple. I mean, if you're welding like I'm welding, you're going to be on the TIG, you're going to be on DC, you're going to be on 2T, and you're going to have the pulse off. Okay, pretty simple. Okay, so now we're going to go on to the dials here. So on the dials, the first The first one is the start amps. Now that dial is not going to do nothing unless you're using that trigger switch. Okay? When you have the trigger switch hooked up and you have that first toggle switch in the, I'm sorry, not the first toggle switch, the third toggle switch, the 2T, if you have it in 4T, then this start amps is going to actually do something. And that's what it's going to start your arc at, whatever you have it set at. Okay? And then your second knob here is going to be the main amp, so that's going to be your peak. It's going to be your peak for your pulse. It's going to be your peak for when you're using the trigger. When you let off that trigger, it's going to go up to 100. I have it set at 150. It's going to go up to 150, and that's what you're going to be welding at. Okay. And then your end amps is the third dial here is your end amps. That's going to, when you push the trigger again, it's going to go to whatever you have that set at. Say it's 50 amps or whatever, and it's going to end your. That's how you're going to end your weld. And then when you release the switch, it's gonna shut off your arc and do your post flow and whatever. So for the type of welding that I do, basic welding, you're only going to use the middle dial. Okay, that's the main amps. That's going to set, and that's what's going to read out on this readout here. So I have it set at 150. When I turn this on, it should be reading like 150, or somewhere around there. It's kind of a fuzzy dial. It's, you're at 150, but it's saying 156 or whatever. So that's the first three dials there. So now the second three dials, they strictly have to do with the pulsing. Okay, so you have the pulse frequency, which is a percentage, and again, you're going to have to play with that. It might be a half second that you want to pulse. It might be a full second. I believe it goes from a half second to 10 seconds, and then it also shows you a second dial, which is like 10 amps to the 200 amps. So I mean, again, it's a fuzzy dial. You're just gonna have to play with it. Okay. The middle one is the pulse amps. So that's going to be the pulse base, what they call a base. Okay, and that's also a percentage. So it goes from 10% to 80%. So you're just going to have to, like I say, play with that again. And then the last button is the pulse time on. So that's also a percentage. It goes from 10% to 90%. And that's going to be, if you look at it on a chart, it looks like a square. It's going to go up and over and down and over. And that's going to be your pulse on and your pulse off, and your pulse on and your pulse off. Okay? And it's a percentage, and you're going to dial it in until it gives you the weld you're looking for, is really what you're going to do. Okay? So now we go to the bottom three dials. Pretty much the first two are just for aluminum welding. AC, you got your AC frequency, that goes from 40 to 200. Again, I haven't done aluminum, so I really can't tell you what that's for. You're gonna have to play with it or look it up somewhere to figure out what that is. And then the arc, the AC balance is another percentage. It has, as far as I know, it has something to do with cleaning. It has to clean the aluminum as it welds. So by changing these two dials, you're going to get a better or a worse weld, and that's the best way I can describe it. So then the last dial here is your post flow. That has to do with your gas. So when you let off your pedal or you let off your switch, it's going to go for a number of seconds. That's in seconds. So it goes from 1 second up to 10 seconds. So you're going to hear the gas continue to run after you stop your arc, and that's what the post flow is. And that helps cool the weld or keep it from bubbling at the end. And that's gonna just run for a little bit after you stop your arc. And that's really all that switch does. And You can adjust it to whatever you want. I have it set right now at 3 seconds. It seems to be working fine for what I'm doing. Okay. So in a nutshell, that's it for the dials and setting up this welder. The next thing is to just plug it in and turn it on and let's start welding. So there's just a couple more things that we have to cover before we start welding. The first thing is you need some type of a grinder. I'm not saying you have to go out and buy one. You could probably use a belt sander or any kind of grinder. But you have to sharpen the tip on the tungsten. So what I've learned over the years is that the best grind on a tungsten is to be a vertical grind, which means holding it this way against your stone versus sideways against your stone. Okay? And what that does is that puts the little grind lines vertical, so when your flame comes out of the end of your tungsten, it'll be a nicer shaped flame. If you go the sideways way, it'll be a swirly type flame, and it'll be fluctuate a little bit as you're welding, and you won't get as nice of a bead. And that's what I've learned over the years with the tungsten. So we're just going to sharpen this up here. Helps if you plug it in. So all I'm doing is holding that against the stone and grinding a nice little sharp point on there. I don't know if you can see that. There you go. So the other thing you want to do is adjust your gas flow. So the only way to do that, you have to have the welder on. Okay. And normally you got this tank bolted to something or strapped into something. I just have it sitting here for this purpose to show you. So with the welder on, you have to push on the foot pedal, and then you'll see the ball move. Okay? So I'm at about 15. That's where I have it set. You just turn this dial. Yeah, I'm at about 18 now. So you have to do that before you start welding. You can't adjust it while you're welding. It's almost impossible to do unless you have somebody else helping you. But now that it's set, it'll be set the minute I turn it on to weld. It'll go to that 18 and it'll work just fine. Okay. So we're all set to start welding. We have our dials all set. Something else you want. I'm not going to put it on for the video here, but you need to cover up your arms, your face, hands. So you need a pair of sleeves or a jacket. Good pair of leather gloves. Do not buy vinyl or any other kind of glove. They make some pretty nice TIG welding gloves. Now these are a lot tighter fitting and a little easier to work with than the big heavy welding gloves that you use for stick welding. And that's so that you can hold this torch and you can hold your rod, you know, and work the rod and everything. And so they sell these nice leather gloves. They're pretty darn nice. One last purchase you're going to have to make is a welding helmet. You can do the old style, that's just a solid lens. or you can go out and buy yourself an auto darkening. Now, there's a lot of people that say these Harbor Freight ones are junk. I don't know. For the little bit of welding that I do, I've had this helmet for years now already, and it's a Chicago Electric from Harbor Freight, and it works just fine for me. It sits down here in a damp basement, and when I start welding, it works just fine. I haven't had any issues with it. Now, if you're welding all the time, you know, go out and buy yourself a nice helmet, you know? I mean, I know they're kind of pricey, but I mean, it's your eyes you're talking about, you know? So, but anyhow, that's your last purchase there is what you gotta go and get yourself one of these helmets. So we're gonna start her up here, and we're gonna run a few beads on this plate and see how this thing works. Now the fan's a little noisy, but you know, when you're welding by yourself at home, it don't matter. And as far as holding this gun, you can hold it any way you want. I've seen all kinds of different ways to hold it. I usually hold it between my, almost like you're writing with a pencil, between my thumb and forefinger, and I take my middle finger and go on the outside of the stem here, and that's how I hold it, and that gives me a nice firm grip on it, and I just move it along the piece. Well, I have to say that weld's pretty darn nice. I had no problem making a bead. Now, back in the day, I am a journeyman mold maker. I haven't worked as a mold maker in 20 years. But back in the day when I was a mold maker, we used to weld on what they called the shear on a mold that cut carpeting. And we would have to put a small bead right on a corner like this here. So I'm going to attempt to do that and see if I can put a little tiny bead on that corner. So here's where the different size dipping welds, dipping sticks come in. Now I had a 3/32 dipping stick there, and it's taken a little bit to melt it into my puddle. So I'm going to switch. I'm going to go to a smaller stick. Well, I am way out of practice, but that actually welded pretty good. Okay, you can see here, this is my first bead. Alright, now like I said earlier, when you see them really nice, pretty beads, that's a guy that's been welding for years. I got a little too hot here, and then I cooled it back off, and then I held my bead pretty good, you know. And the reason TIG welding is so nice for the hobby stuff is there's no spatter. There's no spatter anywhere. I don't have to clean this up. I can just take a wire brush to it and I'm done. So now, this is the first one I was doing here with the bigger stick, and you can see it's kind of pronounced, which is fine, but it wasn't melting very well. The stick wasn't melting. So then I went and got the smaller stick, and you can see here it melted much better. Now the problem on doing a shear edge like that, okay, is you get a little melt away here on the corners right when you start and stop, and that's all in technique. That's all in, you know, getting your heat right and starting slow and then, you know, working your way in. And I'm just out of practice, or that would look a lot better. So here I have a little piece of square tubing. It's actually two pieces, and I just tacked the corners. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try this pulse welding, and I'm going to see if I can do a little bit of a vertical up on that tube. So I'm just going to turn it to the middle setting. I'm going to put my pulse frequency at 0.3. I'm going to put my pulse amps, I'll leave them at 45%. And I'm going to put my pulse time on, and I'll leave that at 50% and see what happens. Everything else stays the same. My peak amps is still at 150, and I'm going to see if I can just run a bead up this tube. Well, that had no problem doing that. I mean, my heat could be a little different, but basically all it did, you could see it, it was just pulsing, okay, the arc. So for a guy that hasn't done any TIG welding in 20 years, I think that's, you know, you can see right in the middle there that I had a little issues, but like I say, it's practice. You gotta work at this every day, you know. Adjust your settings, try another weld, and whatever. Boy, that's pretty good. I think for the average guy like me, this welder will work just fine. No, I didn't go out and buy any stainless rod. I got some stainless here. I was going to do that, but I didn't go get any stainless rod, so we'll leave that go. I did get a weld just as good as the steel. I don't see an issue with it. The one last thing I want to do here, though, is I want to try the stick welder. I want to see, you know, if I can just, by flipping a switch, if I'm going to be able to weld with a stick. So let me get that set up, and we'll be ready to go here in a minute. So I just got a little 16th 6013 rod. If you're not familiar with stick welding, the first number is the 60, is that's the basically the carbon content. It's just like the 70 on here. This is a 70, this is 60. They're just about the same. The third number is the 1. That's an all position rod. I can weld up, down, sideways with this rod. And the 3 is the coating. And I don't know my coatings, but all I know is 3 is some type of coating. If you have a 6011, it's the same rod, it's just a different type of coating. So get your head on straight. So all I did here was I turned it from TIG to stick, and I'm still at the 150 for my amps. and none of the other switches are going to do anything. It should just weld just the way a normal welder works. Well, I tried what I could do with this stick welder. I'm at 200 amps. And I am not getting anywhere. So let me try one more thing. Alright, that works. So that's just me being the inexperienced welder that I am. I still had it on DC. Once I switched to AC, it welds just fine with a stick. And now here you can see the difference between a stick and a TIG. See all the little BBs and stuff on here? It's just dirty as heck. And you go to that nice TIG weld, you know, there's no BBs, no nothing. So that's why you use a TIG welder. So I'm going to give this thing a thumbs up. Like I say, I'm not an expert welder. So you have to play with the settings. You have to figure out how to make it work, essentially, is what you have to do. But as far as I'm concerned, it welded perfectly straight out of the box for me, for what I'm planning on doing with this welder. So I think this is a good buy. The price is right. You're not spending a lot of money, and boy, you know, go out and get yourself one. This thing works pretty darn good. So thanks for watching my Amberg Acres channel. Give me a thumbs up, you know, subscribe to my channel, and hope to see you soon.